Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to our coffee times to talk about horror. And today I'm here to talk to you about found footage horror.
It's coffee time!
Now I have to admit that this subgenre of horror kind of grew on me. I don't think when I started watching horror movies that were found footage I was such a big fan of them, but with time there have been some horror movies that definitely won me over, and now I actually really enjoy found footage films. So today we're gonna talk about found footage, and I'm gonna recommend you 5 books and 5 movies that are found footage stories. Found footage is a cinematic technique in which the majority of the movie is presented in video recordings from some of the characters' points of view, and this found footage is later found and it is presented to the viewers. The events on the screen are typically seen through a camera, through a character's point of view. Sometimes we get to see other characters in the frame, and we also get to hear a lot of, off-screen voices. For added realism in these found footage stories, even though a lot of times, obviously when it comes to movies, we have real actors, they are using like shaky cameras and trying to make it look like it's real people filming their experience. The footage is mostly presented raw, and it's said to be unedited and is exactly how it was found when the cameras, were found in the bodies or whatever, lost in the woods, whatever the cameras were found. So with this technique, what you can expect is kind of almost like pseudo documentaries, like almost documentaries of real events that happened. And I always thought that depended on how you did the story, it might work or not. And I think a lot of the times where it didn't work for me was because of the characters. But found footage is a very strong subgenre of horror that also offers us many different options. As a storytelling technique, found footage has precedence in literature because it is what we got to know as epistolary literature, and you can find examples as well known as Dracula and Frankenstein in there, who are told through diary entries. So you have diary entries, you have correspondence, and that is how we actually learn the story. So it's basically documents that were found. And now that we have talked a little bit about found footage, let's take a look at the 5 book recommendations. First, we have episode 13 by Craig DeLuey, which was such a huge surprise for me because normally paranormal investigations don't always work for me. I'm not somebody that loves to watch YouTube channels that have paranormal investigations, and I know they are very, very popular. Maybe I just have not found the one, or maybe I have not watched them enough to really get into them. So I went into this book a little bit a skeptic, but I had heard good things about it and I actually really enjoyed it. Here we have a program called Fade to Black, which is a TV show in which a married couple is going around to film locations that are supposed to be haunted and that have like ghostly presences, and they film everything to show it later in their TV show. Matt and Claire are the married couple behind this TV show, and they want to go to the Holy Grail of haunted places. That is the Paranormal Research Foundation, which is supposed to be very, very haunted, and a lot of people do not dare to go in. The story is told through tapes, through correspondence, and through diary entries. I really enjoyed the mixed media aspect of this book, obviously because it's mixed media, and I think it really allows you as a reader to really get into the perspective of the different characters and see everything through their own eyes. So thanks to those tapes that you get to experience, you get to really live it with them, but then the correspondence and the diary entries help to explain a lot more the different characters. You get to know what they're going through, understand what they're thinking, and this is kind of like a psychological horror story with ghosts. I think for me the problem with some of the paranormal books that I have read before or the movies is that the plot and the characters are not so well developed and I cannot really get invested, but I feel like episode 13 managed to do that really well. It gives you characters that you really understand and connect with, and it has a very interesting storyline. The creepiness also intensifies and it gets creepier and creepier the more that our characters are getting deeper into this building, let's say. I really enjoyed this and actually made me want to explore more paranormal horror after I read this one. So definitely one that I would recommend you guys to try. Then we have 12 Nights at Rother House by J.W. Ocker. And this is a book that I had on my list for the very longest time. And I finally also got to it last year. And I was pleasantly surprised by this book. Felix is a travel writer, but he has a fondness for the paranormal. So wherever he goes, he tries to go to places that are haunted and he posts about it on his travel vlog. So it's kind of like a travel vlog for people that want to do paranormal investigations. He has been trying for a long time to get into Rother Mansion, which is supposed to be a place that is very haunted. And finally he manages to come to an agreement with the owner and he decides to spend some nights at the Rother House alone by himself, only with his recording material, and see what he can capture on camera. He plans to stay there for 2 weeks and he hopes that with all of the findings and all the footage that he gets, he's able to write a new best-selling book. He plans to not leave the house at all, not have any contact with the outside world, so he brings food with him, like he is ready to be there for 2 full weeks, fully immersed in this house without leaving. But then one day somebody knocks at the door and that is his friend Thomas, but their relationship is a little bit, rocky at the moment, and I loved the moment that Thomas came into the picture because Thomas and Felix have very different beliefs when it comes to the paranormal and ghosts and all of that. So it was really interesting for me to see them talk to each other about all of these. This book is exactly how you make a very different haunted story, and it doesn't have to be too complicated to be great. And it doesn't have to be the scariest story to haunt you. The story is very meta though, because the characters do comment on tropes and things about, ghosts and movies, and they talk a lot about horror movies. They even have games where they talk about horror movies. So it is quite meta and I actually enjoy that aspect about it a lot. The book goes night by night as Felix is commenting on the things that he is finding. He's checking the cameras to see which kind of footage he got, and it gets, as you can imagine, creepier and creepier as you go, the more unsettling things start to happen. I would say for the most part any reader can read this, but there were a couple of moments that might have been a little bit more disturbing or unsettling than others, that might be a little bit more intense. But I think this is such a unique take again on the haunted house experience and story, and I love the concept, love the book, and this is one that I would also recommend you guys, of course. The next one is a book that I have recommended before, but this one fits so well on the found footage subgenre of horror that I had to mention it again, and that is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. We follow a crew that is supposed to make a mockumentary about mermaids and takes off on a boat, and they're trying to film this mockumentary about mermaids, and it's all for comedy and fun. However, they end up actually finding mermaids, and the mermaids that they find, they're not very friendly, probably because they are invading their territory, and so everything ends up quite bloody. The footage that they find from this shipwreck, because obviously the mermaids kill them all, shows the debauchery of the mermaids, and this happens at the very beginning. That is basically the beginning of the book, so it's not really a spoiler. The thing is, after that massacre, there is a new crew sent to actually figure out if the mermaids in that mockumentary are real or not, because a lot of people believe the found footage is fake, because obviously they were filming a mockumentary and they think everything is fake, everything is kind of like for publicity. So a second crew is sent to try to figure out if mermaids are actually real, and in that ship it's not just actors and presenters, it's actually scientific people, people that know about mermaids, like intellectual people. So they send a proper research crew. So this second ship also comes with a built-in security system, and when they get to the spot where the other ship was wrecked, they start their investigation, and of course they will discover that yes, the mermaids are there, they are real, and all hell will break loose. Now, this book has a lot of science talk in it, but I thought that it was very easy to follow as somebody that is not a science person. And I thought that made it a lot more realistic and interesting, and it did feel like a proper investigation and a research of potential real mermaids. And I really enjoyed that aspect of the book. But one of my favorite things about this book was how we get confronted with human behavior, because are humans invading the mermaids' territory and therefore deserve what happened to them. So it's a very interesting thing, because when you're reading the book, sometimes you don't know if you're rooting for the humans or for the mermaids, and the mermaids are definitely scary in this book. I don't think I have read much horror with mermaids, but definitely I would like to try more like this. The next book that I would like to talk to you about is Fantastic Land by Mike Bokoven. Now, I have not listened to the audiobook, but I have heard that it's really good. So if you do have access to the audiobook, I've heard it's great. Since the 1970s, Fantastic Land has been a theme park where fun is guaranteed. That is until a hurricane kind of ravages through it, and the people that are working there don't think it's fun anymore. 5 weeks later, after the hurricane, the authorities managed to get into this theme park, which was isolated for those 5 weeks, and what they find there is horrifying. Photos soon are shared online of really gruesome people that have been killed, with the pass of this hurricane. And the only group of survivors is actually a group of teenagers. So because they cannot explain why these teenagers survived, we see a series of interviews with them, which is part of these, fun footage kind of mixed media aspect of the book. So they gather devices, mobile phones, things like that, from the people that were there to try to figure out and watch the footage and try to see what actually happened, together with doing these interviews. They want to figure out how these people survived there for 5 weeks. This is full of characters to love, characters to hate. It has great dynamics between the characters, and I think this is also a great social commentary. It talks about, the big presence of social media in our civilization and how we behave socially, because we are so filled with social media every single day, and what happens when that is taken away from us for 5 weeks, and how we survive then, basically. And last but not least, I wanted to recommend you a short horror story compilation, and that is called Found. It is an anthology of found footage horror stories, and it's edited by Andrew Cole and Gabino Iglesias. Between April and August 2021, 18 horror writers disappeared, and these stories are going to tell what happened to them while they were gone, while they disappeared. Now, a couple of these stories do address the pandemic, because obviously these were written in 2021, so we were still very fresh with that. If that is something that you don't like to read about, I just wanted to mention it. I just wanted to mention it here in case that is not something that you're really interested to read about, but it's only, I think, 2 stories maybe out of the 18, so it's not like the majority of them. I think when you have stories that are found footage stories, there has to be an extra kick, an extra element added to the story to make the story work and not be just another boring generic story. And I think a lot of these short stories manage to do that, and I think that you're going to have a good time with it. Obviously, as with any other anthology, there might be 1 or 2 stories that you don't really like, but that is always, I think, the case. Some stories are more epistolary stories, other ones are more really into the found footage thing, so some other ones are a mix of both, so you're gonna find here a little bit of everything. And now, you guys, we changed to movies. We're gonna talk about 5 horror movies that include found footage. The first one is one of my favorites, and I think I've talked about this before as well, but here we are again, because if you have not seen it yet, I'm here to remind you to watch Wreck. This is a Spanish found footage movie. Now, it has an American remake. I have to admit, I have never seen the American remake because I don't feel like I need to. I don't have the necessity. And the first Spanish movie is perfect. The film stars a reporter who, with her cameraman, accompanies a group of firefighters on an emergency call to an apartment building to discover an infection spreading. The building is being sealed up and all the occupants are ordered to follow a strict quarantine. I think part of why this works really well is because it's such a down-to-earth story in a way. You simply have a news reporter and all of the footage is being captured by Pablo, the cameraman, and then we have this girl that is the reporter and she is basically breaking the news about this disease that is spreading in this apartment building that has been now sealed and quarantined, and that is something that can happen. And it's funny because this movie is from 2007 and it's something that we will, relive during the pandemic. And this story takes something that is so possible in the real world, but then adds a lot of frights and scares and disturbed images. I think this movie also allows you to get to know the main characters before all hell breaks loose, which tends to work really well. It's something that happens in Cloverfield and the Blair Witch Project, where you spend a lot of time with the characters until the really heavy scenes start to happen. I will never ever forget the ending of the Blair Witch Project, and I think this movie is a great found footage story. In the beginning, in this apartment building, you have a crisis, you have confrontations, you have fights between tenants, but at some point you realize that they are infected and this kind of infection is turning them into monsters, and it starts to progress as the movie goes on. And like I said, if you've never seen it before, please give it a chance. The next movies are all brought to you by the wonderful year 2014. The next 3 movies in this list are from that year. So needless to say, 2014 was a great year for found footage films. The first one is the American movie The Taking of Deborah Logan. And this is a movie that a lot of people might see images and think, this is not going to be for me, it's going to be too stupid, it's going to be, too generic, but trust me, this movie is worth your time. This is also the feature film directorial debut of Adam Robitel, who later on went on to do Insidious: The Last Key, he did Escape Room, and Escape Room Tournament of Champions. So after this film, he went on to do other horror movies that I think everybody knows. So if you haven't seen his feature directorial debut, you have to. Set in Virginia, it tells the story of a documentary crew making a film about Alzheimer patients who uncover something sinister while documenting a woman who has the disease. Mia documents the daily life of Deborah and her daughter because she's using these for her thesis on Alzheimer's. Deborah is being taken care of by her middle-aged daughter called Sarah, and Sarah accepts the offer of these kind of filming day-to-day life because the money is something that she could really use right now. Having a mother with Alzheimer's means a lot of medical expenses, and so she agrees for the crew to come and film her mom every single day to see how Alzheimer affects not only the person that suffers this condition, but also the family. It is about the hopelessness of the disease and also how it affects, in this case, the daughter and everything that she goes through. And it is not just about, how devastating that is. This is a horror movie. And as the movie goes on, you're going to see that Deborah's behavior starts to get weirder and weirder and weirder. I'm not gonna spoil the movie for you, but I will tell you that this movie is not really relying on jump scares and all of those cheap thrills. It's actually scary, and this is one of those movies where the ending left me marked forever. I will never be able to forget the ending of this movie, and I think neither will you. So this is a great movie. If you've never seen it before, I recommend it. Next we have As Above, So Below, and I know this is one that some people love, some people might hate, but I think this is a very solid entry, and this is kind of like a very interesting take on this trope that has been done before of people stuck in catacombs and tunnels and stuff like that. Scarlett Marlowe's pursuit for the Philosopher's Stone turns into a nightmare when her exploration group begins to encounter supernatural experiences while descending into the catacombs of Paris. The title refers to the popular paraphrase of the second verse of the Emerald Tablet. The story is presented as a documentary of a crew exploring the catacombs of Paris, and it is also related to the 9 circles of hell from Dante's Inferno. Scarlett has spent most of her life trying to figure out how to get the Philosopher's Stone. She has been investigating everywhere, and that has now led her to the Paris catacombs. So she goes there and she kind of recruits a crew of people to help her go down and investigate. Apparently it is the first feature film that has been able to film in location, so actually in the catacombs and the tunnels, which makes it even more claustrophobic for me, to be honest. As they go deeper into the catacombs, they will encounter manifestations of their own fears, of their own guilt. There is a use of head-mounted cameras, which means that you are able to see the different characters' perspective and the different locations, because the characters do split up at some point, so you're able to see their different experiences, which also, you know, you don't want to think about the flaws of the movie, but obviously why do we have footage of the people that disappeared and were never found again? Because obviously if they have head-mounted cameras, unless everything was being sent to a cloud, even though I don't think the catacombs has any signal. You know, you don't have to think too much, because otherwise you cannot enjoy your horror. I think the shots really work for me because I am somebody that I find these kind of films claustrophobic, same as with books. Anything that is like underwater, trapped somewhere in catacombs, in really tight tunnels and caves, people getting lost in this type of like really tight spaces, that gives me anxiety. So that works really well for me. And I think this being filmed actually in location gives it a more creepy feeling. The architecture and everything that you get to see is beautiful. One criticism that I have seen online that I can kind of agree with is that this movie is a little bit hard to follow. And that is because this movie has a lot of symbolism and esoteric references, and I think this is also a reason why potentially this movie is great for a second watch, because there is a lot of things that you're going to miss, a lot of things you're not going to catch or understand exactly, because you need to know the symbolism for that and all of the references. But I think it's still a great claustrophobic horror movie to watch. The next one, it's a movie that I am super aware is not going to be for everybody. And to be honest with you, when I first heard about the movie and I heard people talking about it, I was like, I don't think I'm gonna watch it because it's probably not gonna be for me. And that is Creep. I ended up watching the movie at some point. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna watch it because now there's a part 2 and I want to know, and you know, fear of missing out. So I ended up watching Creep and I actually enjoyed it. I didn't think I would, because this is a movie that doesn't look like any type of movie that I would watch, because it's very bizarre and unique, let me put it that way, and it has a main character that is very weird, but I actually love this movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. From a story by Bryce and Mark Duplass, who both star in the film, this is filmed as found footage, and Bryce portrays a videographer assigned to record an eccentric client played by Duplass. Creep was inspired by Bryce's experiences on Craigslist and the movies My Dinner with Andre, Misery, and Fatal Attraction. Bryce and Duplass refined the film's story during filming, which resulted in multiple versions of each scene and several alternate scenarios. Aaron answers an online ad. Somebody is looking for a videographer. It is a man that has been diagnosed with cancer and he wants to leave some video footage for his unborn son. So Aaron decides to take the job and drives to this man's house and starts to record him, you know, get to know him, and the plan is just that, to film this man and have him talk to the camera and kind of collect all of it as a present for his unborn child for when he's no longer with us. And that weird guy that employs Aaron is called Joseph. And when we get to know him, you immediately feel there is something off with him. I have to praise the actor of this movie because it is such an amazing portrayal. And this guy is very unsettling. As the days go by and Aaron is filming him, he starts to, you know, display weirder and weirder behaviors. This becomes uncomfortably intimate very quickly. And Joseph is a guy that you don't know if he's just crazy or if he's just very dangerous. Is Joseph simply a man that lacks social skills? Or is he really deranged and disturbed? I think the performance of the Plus is the best thing of the movie, so there is not too much to the plot. That's basically the plot. A videographer that needs money accepts this kind of sketchy job and finds himself in the house of this weird and bizarre guy. I also really enjoyed part 2, and I'm still waiting to watch the Creeper tapes, which was released in Shudder, and I think they've already confirmed a season 2 of that because it was very successful. And I love the promo that they did on Instagram. I think it was fantastic. If you saw it, then you know. I thought it was great. All the marketing and promo they did for that TV show, for that series based on the movies. So yeah, and now let's go to our number 5 found footage horror film. And that is Deadstream from 2022, which is another one that I think it might not be for everybody, but I did appreciate it that they kind of brought the found footage to a more modern approach. And other movies had done it before, but I feel like the other ones didn't quite succeed as much as this one did. The plot follows a disgraced content creator attempting to resurrect his career by live streaming himself spending the night in a notorious haunted house. When he accidentally unleashes a vengeful spirit, his comeback event becomes a fight for his life. The film uses a found footage format displaying the live stream itself. Deadstream is kind of like a modern take on the found footage subgenre of horror because we have YouTube and we have Twitch as forms of display of what's going on, but also it's not like we don't have any shaky cameras at all because we still have smartphones and they can also give us shaky images. So at the end of the day, it still has that classic found footage feel to it. We have a single actor in a haunted house, and when you start this movie, you feel like this might be another generic found footage movie, that it might not be anything exciting or new, but then something happens. Some other elements are introduced, and then it starts to turn into something quite unique and entertaining. You still get your typical production when it comes to found footage movies. You have alternating cameras, you have mounted cameras, different angles, stuff like that, everything, you know, like that, but there is an added element to this film. Now, when it comes to the production, it's still your typical found footage production with mounted cameras and different takes and angles and video inserts, but the production value, I would say it's quite good. The special effects, the editing, the score, the pacing, I think everything overall was great in this movie, so that's why it worked for me. Even though this is not a masterpiece, I do think it pushes a little bit the boundaries of found footage, and I thought it had some unique takes and some unique things that it did, and that's why I think it deserves a watch. It also walks a fine line between horror and comedy, which I think is something that is not always introduced in found footage movies. They tend to be really serious and really scary, so this one is a little bit more lighthearted. And those were, you guys, my 5 book and 5 movie recommendations of found footage horror. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know down below if you enjoy this subgenre of horror and which other subgenre of horror you want me to cover next. Thank you guys as always so much for watching, and I hope to see you all as always in our next coffee time. Bye!